Hello, Texans. I'm Susana, and this is the Susana Gibb Show. It's exciting time in Texas. It's 44 degrees outside, so apparently winter is coming. It's also Rangers playoff season. They're in the World Series, which is super exciting. Playoff baseball, very fun and exciting to watch. And also, our insurance company was named Best in DFW. Gibb Insurance Services, the sponsor of this podcast. We're very excited to have this recognition. So thank you to all of you who voted and participated. We did not buy this award. There's lots of awards out there you can kind of buy, but we didn't. We didn't even know this was happening. I just opened up the paper and looked for insurance to see. I was like, I wonder who they voted for. Some rando people. But no, it was us. So yeah, yay, very exciting. So anyway, for those of you who have been with us for a while on this podcast, you know we talk to artists, entrepreneurs, idealists, and lately I've just been trying to hang on to the conversation because you never know where it's going to go. Race, equity, inclusion, feminism, politics, religion, banning books. And our next guest also took a turn like that. She's been an artist for forever. And lots of good things to say. I hope you enjoy. Please reach out to us at Gibb Insurance Services. We love hearing from you guys about what you like and what maybe we could do different. And now, on with the show. So on the podcast today, I have Vicki Meek. She's a nationally recognized artist with works in places like the African American Museum in Dallas, the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston. She was also selected as one of 10 national artists to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the Nasher Sculpture Center and was 2021 Texas Artist of the Year. Her multimedia works, I know, so cool, prioritizes and supports forgotten, left behind histories and identities. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Susana, for having me.
I had such a good time going and looking at all of your works. As we discussed previously, we are both seasoned people, which means we've been around for a while, but it also means you have so many great things out there. It's really, your body of work is so impressive.
Thank you so much for that. I have been working a long time. In fact, in 2019, I had a 30-year retrospective at the Houston Museum of African American Art. And that was 30 years, but I had actually had more than that, but we capped it at 30 years. So yeah, there's a lot of my work that's out there. I have been working in various media in that time period. And it was really kind of, for me, a very interesting thing to see that much work, because most of the work that was in that show was not what I'd been doing for the last 40 years. I had been invited to be a part of exhibitions, and I made what are called discrete works for specific exhibitions. And that's the work that was in that retrospective. So I had literally never seen all of that work together, and it was great.
Oh,
yeah, it was great to see it all together.
So when you make pieces of art like that, it goes away from you, right? Like you don't get it anymore. Like if you make a piece of art for the Nasher, does the Nasher own it?
Oh, no. That's not how it works.
Oh,
okay. They want to own
it. Got it.
What happens is you get invited to do an exhibition and you make a work for that exhibition. And when that exhibition is over, it comes back to you, unless the museum buys it, which is what happened to my installation with the Museum of Fine Arts Houston. I did the installation as a commission piece. They saw it, they loved it, they wanted it, and so they bought it. But that's not typically how museums get work. Usually it's through their acquisitions committee, and then they go out and they decide which artists they want and they buy the work. So I had to get some of it back from collectors, but I had a lot of the work that was in that exhibition in storage. So I just got it all out of storage and dusted it all off, made sure it was all okay. And that's what got put into the retrospective.
How many pieces of work do you have?
Did I own?
Like if you tally them all up. Well, that you, between collectors, museums that you own, how many pieces of work?
I think in that exhibition, for the retrospective, there were, I think they had like 78 pieces, 80 pieces or something like that in that particular show. But my work for the last 40 years has been installation, which, is ephemeral. It comes and it goes. I put it up. It's a taking the gallery and using the whole gallery as the piece to discuss. And then all that comes down. And so I will use over and over again various items from the installations in other installations, which is what becomes my visual vocabulary. So people who know my work, they can look at it and they can tell what I'm talking about based on the various and sundry elements that I have in the installation. So the Museum of Fine Arts Houston actually owns an installation, which is both a good thing and a bad thing, because installation takes up a whole gallery so that the piece is not always up. They put it up for special things or certain kinds of shows. And, so the work doesn't get seen like a person who would have a painting in a museum would get seen. But it's what I chose to do for the last 40 years because it's the medium that I felt I could best express myself.
Interesting. So you had the 10th anniversary project with the Nasher, but you're working with the Nasher for a second time, and they awarded you a fellowship.
This is their first.
Will you talk a little?
This is the first fellowship. This is an inaugural fellowship. Let's put it that way.
What does it mean? This is a dumb question, but what does it mean when you get a fellowship? Is it like they're going to pay you a certain amount of money, or is it?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
They pay. Well, let me backtrack. This is actually the third time I've worked with the Nasher. The first time was they commissioned the site-specific work that was part of their 10th anniversary that still exists. It's still on the campus of Paul Quinn College. I made it permanent. It was supposed to be temporary, but I convinced Paul Quinn that they should keep it. And then the second time they invited me to do a commission work for. We were in the pandemic. It was after George Floyd's murder, and they wanted me to do an installation in response. And that's the one, Stony the Road We Trod, that you may have seen online, that I decided that rather than do something that was like really dealing with anger and the pain and all of that, that I should do what I've been doing, which are these healing rooms, basically, where people can come and reflect and really spend some time healing rather than hurting. And that particular installation was done in 2021, I believe. Yeah, 2021. We were just coming out of the pandemic. And it was great because I was able to use some of the elements that I used in that installation to make the installation that I did for my Texas Artist of the Year exhibition. Because at the Art League of Houston, I had 3 full galleries to use. They have 3 galleries, and they gave all of them to me for my.
Nice.
They normally do. You usually get 1 gallery. So I was able to use some of the elements from the Stony the Road We Trod in this Art League installation, because I was once again looking at this idea of the ancestors healing us and being a part of our foundation and all of that. And so it was great. I had a piece that related to a piece that I had done earlier in Dallas. But to go back to the inaugural fellow thing, what happened is after that installation was done, Jeremy Strick approached me about doing something permanently with the Nasher. And he said, we want a permanent relationship with you. What do you think that should be? And we talked. So anyway, we tossed around a few ideas, like artist in residence and this and that. And so I talked with a friend of mine, Rick Lowe, who had done some residencies and what have you. And he said, you should propose being a fellow, because with a fellowship, you can sort of design what it is that you want to do. And then from there on, if they continue with the fellowship, then that's what the fellowship will be. So I proposed that to Jeremy. He liked the idea. And they raised a bunch of money because, the idea is that I'm a fellow for them. So I'm not an employee per se, but I am on their payroll.
Okay.
Um, and then I decided that what I wanted was for this fellowship to address the idea of these disappearing communities in Dallas, of disappearing communities of color in Dallas due to gentrification. And so that's what this 10th Street Historic District project is. It's an examination of how can artists in some way creatively commemorate and remember, or in this case, they're not gone yet, but they're rapidly disappearing. How do we do something that will keep those stories alive, the stories of the people who live there?
So, and this fellowship was awarded in December of 2022, correct?
Yes.
And it's an 18-month fellowship. So at this point, you are about halfway in, right?
Actually, 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah, 18 months is this first phase that we're doing. And the first phase is 10th Street Historic District. But then we will roll into the Mexican-American community and what, Little Mexico's gone and, other communities are disappearing rapidly. And then the last one will be the indigenous community, which is that practically no one knows anything about that because it's been gone for so long. And in each case, what I'm doing is I started this one off. This is the African-American one. I'm rolling over to be just one of the artists, and then Angel Faz will become the lead artist on that project, and they will deal with their community. And then we'll roll it over the third time to Jody Yellowfish, who will do the indigenous community, so that I won't be the lead artist anymore after this phase. And that's intentional. I want these younger artists to have the experience of, doing a project like this.
Interesting. Do you feel like, because you were, for 20 years, you were at the South Dallas Cultural Center, which you retired in 2016.
Yes.
Did that make you more conscious of how to promote other artists?
No.
And giving other artists a chance?
No, I would say that has been my career forever. I started in arts administration in Connecticut as the Artists in Schools coordinator. So I was promoting artists from, this is in the 70s. So I've been promoting artists a long time. And it's just, I was mentored. I was mentored by Elizabeth Catlett and many other older women, Black women artists. And I feel like it's my responsibility to promote other artists. It's not just me out here in this world. I feel like it's hard enough for women artists in particular to get anywhere. And if we're not helping each other, who's going to help us? It's one of the reasons why I'm so high on Vignette Art Fair, which is a visual art fair that will open in the first week of November. That is all about women artists in Texas. And I curated that, not curated it, but I juried it last year. And then the year before that, during the pandemic, they couldn't have an actual fair. So we did a thing where we awarded grants to 5 women artists just to do and had a pop-up exhibition in Deep Ellum. But, if we're not helping each other, I don't know who's going to help us. So that's one of the motivations behind my helping other artists, is that, artists are not terribly revered in this country, as you probably well know. I went to school in Europe when I was a kid and when I was in college, and it was amazing how people viewed artists there versus what they do here. Here the first question people ask you when you say you're an artist is, was that your hobby? And, they were like, artista. I mean, they were thrilled to know that they were talking to an artist. So, we gotta admit that here we have to help each other.
What is that? Are there less artists there? Is it more interesting, or is it just,
no, it's just
how much more important art is?
Exactly. Art is something that is not just an add-on in other countries. Here, we all know that the arts for the longest time were just something the elite played around with. It was not something that and even now, not the ordinary person doesn't typically know much about art because we don't teach it. We don't use it as an ongoing thing in our community. I mean, it's only recently that we've begun to see a real upswing in public art where people are engaged in that. Most of the public art programs now around the country almost require that an artist engage with community before they do the work. But that's a new phenomenon. That's not the way we typically engage with art in this country. And most of the art programs have been taken out of the public schools, so kids don't get to grow up doing art like I did, So, in Europe, that's not the case. In Africa, that's not the case. In Asia, that's not the case. These people are exposed to their art all the time.
One of the things that you do that I really found interesting was the way that you look at, there's two things as far as marking history through your art, but also exploring current themes. Like one of the shows, which I found, I love the title for this, and it's at the Talley Dunn. It was the Talley Dunn show. What point do we disappear? Black women's obsession with white femininity. Would you talk a little bit about that show and what that was about?
Sure. So first of all, I love that show. I love all my shows, but
great title.
I love this show. Because this was, first of all, it was my first foray into Dallas, because my art life has been in Houston, because I didn't want to compete with the local artists, because I felt like that my job was to promote them.
And what year was this, just before we get too far down the road?
We just did that show last year.
Oh, okay. For some reason, I thought it said 1980s, but maybe that's different show. As far as what point do we disappear?
No, that was just done last year.
Oh, okay.
And it's an idea that I had been mulling around in my head for a long time, and it was primarily because I was observing the way in which Black women were basically losing their Blackness, with the weaves and the lightening of the skin and the various the body image, thinness, and all of that. And so I've been, and I have a daughter, who is now 38. And so, I had to intentionally raise her in a way that would make her never be ashamed of her Blackness. And that was a struggle, because when she was in elementary school, a lot of kids were teasing her because she had natural hair. And a lot of those kids' hairs were permed. And so, I had been talking about, I got to do something that addresses this whole notion of what Black women are and have become. And it particularly became amplified when I went to Africa, and the African women were doing the same thing. And so there is a piece in the show that is entitled, "If You Can't Be Black and Beautiful in Africa, Where the Hell Can You Be?" And that was, because I was looking at these African women wearing these white European wigs and bleaching their skin to their detriment, because in Ghana they had to outlaw bleaching. They were having so many health issues around these women bleaching themselves. And so the show explores all of that, but it also looks at the things that we as Black people internalized during slavery, about inferiority. So there was, a through thread that looks at sort of the idea of self-hate and what that produces in someone. And the interesting thing was, yes, I was talking specifically to Black women about our issues, but so many white women were coming up to me and going, "Oh my God, this so resonates with me, because I was told this, that, and the other." All the things that they were told. If you weren't blonde, you weren't pretty. If you didn't have blue eyes, that's what you should strive to. All of those things were coming out with. So I had Indian women coming up to me talking about, that's an issue in our country too, this whole colorism thing. And I was like, oh yeah, I do know that. As a matter of fact, it's an issue all over the world. So it was a women's conversation that I was having, even though I was making it specifically about Black women's struggles around beauty. And I did a little mini film using my daughter that looked at this notion of Africa and how we have really sort of lost the sense of beauty that comes from the African aesthetic, but that also so has Africa. So it was, that whole conversation was about the sort of universality of what this conversation is about.
So I'm looking at the Talley Dunn Gallery. How long have you worked with them?
This will be my second year of being with Talley Dunn, because I never had gallery representation as an installation artist. I didn't really need it as an installation artist. But these works, as you can see, are works on paper. They're big, but they're works on paper. And I'm doing a lot of work with works on paper because I do a lot of travel internationally to third world countries, and I want to be able to do the art no matter where I am. And that makes it possible for me to do that.
There was an interesting piece that I found, and this is, I like how you tackle themes with your art, with women and the self-hate of how we should look and how we feel, and then the history of the 10th Street. And there was, and I can't remember exactly where I found it, and it was like I read so much about you before I did this, and I didn't write this one thing down to find it, but you talked about the effect of heroin on the Black community. I think it's on your website.
You got the 1980 from. That's what. That's the.
Will you talk a little bit about that, because you had a piece connected with it as well, didn't you? And
yes, I had two. I had done two pieces. That was one that was left. Actually, that's the collector too now. But it was done for an exhibition called Forever Free, the history of African American women artists, and that I guess that came out in '80. That toured in '80. It toured to several museums, and that particular piece was looking at the way in which the drugs dissipated the Black community during the late '70s, and of course, since that time we have come to understand that the CIA was actually involved in the introduction of certain drugs into the Black community after the Black Power movement got so prominent. They had to sort of neutralize that community, and that's what happened. They brought drugs in, introduced drugs, and then that became so.
So back it up just a little bit for somebody who's maybe not familiar. So the Black Power movement of the 70s and 80s, and
70s really, because it really petered out by the 80s.
And so the CIA said, we got to figure out a way to
neutral
to deal with
these folks, yeah.
And so they introduced heroin.
Crack and heroin both were quickly sort of available, all of a sudden readily available. And we've now come to understand after, and this is well documented actually, by the way, that those drugs were introduced by the CIA.
Where is it documented?
Well, there are various people who, historians who researched how did all this, because, it was like, how did this happen? And so they began to research. And so there, you can get Open Records Act, you can get certain documents.
Mm-hmm.
Now things are redacted, but you can still get a lot of information. And that's how they found out that, this was not a mistake. Some of their agents were, instructed to do this, and they did it. And of course, you can't blame the CIA for people using drugs, because that's a personal choice. But it was done at a time when, the Black community was very vulnerable because of the a lot of the stuff that was happening in those communities, the gentrification of those communities, and so people were being pushed out into the margins, especially in big cities. And so I wanted to do a piece that talked about the fact that the use of these drugs was self-destruction, and to understand that as you're doing this, you're self-destructing. And what I talked about was that, lynching happened in the turn of the century of the 20th century. That was a big thing, with a lot of lynching. The anti-lynching laws had to be passed in order to deal with them. And they didn't actually get passed across the country. And so I was saying that the lynching of the 80s comes in the form of a mighty horse, which was heroin. That's what heroin was called, horse. And to make people understand that this was a new way of neutralizing the Black community. And of course, then we had the crack epidemic, and that did the same thing. So I was very interested in the idea of us being aware of what drugs were doing to our community.
Wow. I didn't read that part of it. I didn't read the CIA part of it. And this, I mean, I guess there was the part about, well, it was introduced. I just didn't hear by ear. It feels like such a betrayal of people who are supposed to be taking care of the country, not figuring out ways to.
Now, you understand that they've done a lot of things that we don't particularly.
Yeah. That's a hard part. You know, we talked about that in the last podcast with Doug Swanson about he did a big study on the Texas Rangers. So, which was a very interesting discussion, and it raises some interesting questions. It's how do we look at history in a way with our modern eye to reflect, look back on what was done, judge, not judge, examine. And it becomes at such an interesting time when the controlling the narrative is very it's up for grabs.
Right. I mean, I think it's one of the reasons why I am so intent on making sure that the stories get told that need to be told. Because as we look at these states who are trying to literally take us back to the 1950s when there was nothing really in the history books about Black people, except I can tell you, having gone to school in the 1950s, we learned about two people, Harriet Tubman and George Washington Carver, and that was it. So all of the Black history that I know from my family, not from school. And what we're rapidly, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you go ahead.
What we're rapidly going back to is that time when children will not learn about the struggles of African Americans because the struggles might make a white child feel bad, which I haven't found a single white child ever who has been upset by learning about history. In fact, it makes them more eager to learn more. And, you know, I feel like these politicians are literally missing the point because, first of all, we live in the internet, in a technological age when these children, you ban a book, they're going to go find that book. And
it makes it more interesting.
Of course. And the chances of them having read the book in the first place are so slim because, you know, kids aren't reading. Let's just put it out there. They're not reading any books. And so what you've done is you've essentially alerted them to the fact that they ought to read these books because, I mean, after all, in my time, it was Catcher in the Rye. You know, that was a banned book at one point, and, you know, everybody wanted to read Catcher in the Rye because of it. So I'm really concerned that we don't tiptoe around this. I mean, as an artist, I feel I have a platform to talk about all kinds of things that maybe folks don't want kids reading. But, you know, I ran a cultural center for 20 years, and I had kids from the age of 5 to the age of 15 in my program, and they learned all about their history that they never learned in school, and all it did was make them prouder to be themselves. So, you know, the idea that this is going to somehow damage our children's minds by knowing what is really going on in the world, no, it means that they're going to be really informed adults when they get to adulthood, and maybe they'll make better decisions than some of these people who are, you know, trying to erase the history.
What do you feel like your responsibility as an artist is?
Well, I will say this is only me. I don't feel like there is a thing you can say artists are responsible for. This is for me. For me, I feel I have a responsibility to uplift my people as I'm doing my work. I have a responsibility to tell the truth in my work. I have a responsibility to make sure that the work is always excellent, meaning the craftsmanship is excellent, because I feel that that's part of this conversation about being an artist is, are we putting out the best possible product for people to, you know, engage with? And I also feel it's my responsibility to remember. You know, memory is very important. And I am one of those artists who wants to remember and to put out there what I am remembering and to also my history. My history is really important to me. And so I feel like that's always going to be a part of what I do.
You've had so much success, but having been an artist, I'm still an artist, but an artist life is not one happy cakewalk of success.
No.
It's almost like if there has to be struggles to be an artist.
Absolutely.
It's like you can't do it without the struggles.
Absolutely. And I don't shy away from the struggle. There's some people who are, just depleted by if that doesn't go right and they just don't know what to do. And that doesn't ever faze me. And I can tell you that it's from, going, I went to art school in 1967. I'm sorry, 1967. Oh my God, a long time ago. I was the only
seasoned baby.
I know, very. I went to Rhode Island School of Design. That's where I started. I was the only Black female in the entire school. No Black faculty. And I can tell you, in the 6 years of college, I've never had a Black faculty member as an art professor. So, I knew that I had to have some strength to do what I wanted to do because I wasn't seeing myself as I was doing it. And so now things are a little bit better, not a lot better, because if you look at these art departments, they're still pretty white, pretty male in many cases. You have to have that inner strength if you're going to be an artist in this country, because you're not with a lot of support.
What was your biggest challenge as an artist when you literally were like, you know what, that's it, I'm not doing this anymore, I can't do it? Never had it.
Never had that moment. In fact, it's one of the reasons why, as an arts administrator, I kept being an artist. I did not, like a lot of my friends who were in the business, we all, back in the 70s, were artists starting out. There was no school to go get arts administration training. We were all artists. But I made a commitment to myself that I was never going to stop producing my work. So I committed to doing at least 2 shows a year that I would be in. They could be group shows, but I had to make work. And that has served me well, because I don't think I would have been able to do what I'm doing now if I had not continued to be an artist, a working artist, throughout my entire arts administration career. So I never had a moment of, I don't think I can do this anymore. It's like, nope, I'm going to do it. I had 2 kids and I did it.
You're going to do it?
Yeah, I had full-time jobs and I did it, and that it's a juggling act, but, I did it.
Well, there's so many, we talk to so many people who have overcome, so many things as far as, and that's some of the feedback I get from people is like, wow, I really like when in a previous podcast, we had a guy who hit rock bottom, literally rock bottom, and kind of crawled his way back to the top. What challenge do you think? Did you ever have a rock bottom moment that you were like really had to struggle to crawl back up, as well as, and how you did it?
I think the only time that I was actually I'm a really positive person. That's the first thing.
Interesting.
I'm very blessed to have not been, burdened with depression or things like that many artists do have. That's a common thing, is that there are artists have depression and all kinds of other, mental issues. I'm not that person, but I will say that when I got divorced, that was a very difficult time, because I was just beginning to really take off as far as my art was concerned. And I had these 2 kids, although I will say I chose well, because my ex-husband was not one of those guys that was going to disappear on me. So he was, actually very involved with my kids. So I didn't have that pressure. But of course, I was the first person to get divorced in my family. And that was a really big thing, because, my parents were not people who ever thought that that's something you did. You worked it out. You went to counseling, you got help, you did whatever you had to do. So that was difficult. And I had a period there where of course, I did do an installation about it. It's called Till Death Till Death or Divorce Do Us Part. And that was an installation I did that my ex wasn't very happy about. But anyway, I tend to work things out through my art rather than to, fall into a deep funk and not be productive. The same thing happened when I had this surgery, my thyroid taken out. I was really at a point of, what's happening to me? I had never had a physical ailment like this. I did an installation about it and worked out pretty well. A lot of people respond to it well. So I would say the biggest challenge that I ever had in art, being an artist, was that I went into sculpture and women were not the sculptors. You know what I mean? It's like you were constantly being faced by male instructors telling you, why are you doing this? What are you doing? So that was a big, could have been a big obstacle, but I just saw it as a challenge. It's like, oh, you're going to tell me I shouldn't be doing this? I'm going to do it in spades, so that's just who I am.
Yeah. Mindset is everything, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it really is. And I mean, support. I will say this, it's mindset and support, because I had parents who literally made me believe I could do anything I wanted to do. And when I was ready to quit graduate school, I did have a moment at that point when I was like, I've had it. Tired of these guys telling me that I shouldn't be doing this. I was out of money. I went home and I was telling my mom I've had it. And she looked at me and she went, really? How much money do you need? And I told her how much. And my parents had not financed my education because I'd always gotten these scholarships. And my mom said, you've never asked us for a penny. Here, she wrote the check out, gave it to me. She said, now go back and tell those people to kiss your ass. And so that's what I did, but it was her saying that, no, you're not going to let these people defeat you, and money is not going to be the problem. So she sent me back to Wisconsin and I finished up, got my MFA and got out of there. But that was probably the lowest point that I'd ever gotten was in graduate school.
Well, Vicki, it has been a pleasure having you on the show. I really enjoyed talking with you. And per the usual, I could talk with you for about 2 more hours about art and theory and history and race and feminism and everything else. All those things, all the light topics. We'll just throw in religion and politics while we're at it. Why not?
Let's do that.
Well, thank you again. How can people find you if they want to find you?
Well, I'm represented by Talley Dunn Gallery, and that gallery is located near the campus of SMU on Tracy Street, and they can go, Talley has my work, and so they can go there to see the work. And I do have a website, which you're welcome to visit too, which is VickiMeekArt.com. And I will be showing from now on, on occasion, not every year, but, next year I'll have another one-person show at Talley Dunn Gallery, and come see it. Come see it.
I am excited to come and see it. Thank you again for being here.
I always love talking to people who have been in art for a long time because you end up talking about the state of art, their art, where they want to go, where it's been, how it's changed. And she was a lovely person. I can't wait to have her back. And now, your insurance story of the week. I'm just going to hold this up one more time. We love our clients and customers. They're really what keep us in this business. We're not in this business because we love dealing with insurance companies. That's 100% for sure. It's always about the people. It's about the people, about the connections we make, the relationships we forge. And so to be honored with this really means a lot to us. So thank you, DFW. And we look forward to continue serving you in the best way possible. Appreciate that you guys keep showing up, keep listening. Thank you again, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks. Have a good one.